Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at a YouTube interview talking about the Cajuns and the Creoles in Louisiana and kind of who they are and some of the mixing up of and blending of these two specific terms. So the reason we're doing this is because in many ways you would consider Marie Grace, at least on her mother's side, her father's from Pennsylvania, a Cajun, so to speak, because her mother's family is Catholic. They've been living in Louisiana for a long time, and they are French. So this is one of a very general term for what is it the Cajuns or the Creoles? Again, these things are mixing up and, but yes. So it's the Cajuns. So again, that is a very generalized and very narrow term, just because it, like the Creole, which is almost what you would be consider Marie Grace, or not Marie Grace, but Marie Grace or Cecile, they are people who are native to Louisiana of Roman Catholic heritage, and basically either ancestry is French or Spanish, technically. So that is the broad term for both. But it's a very interesting conversation about this concept, and both Creoles and Cajuns, which are very much, I wouldn't say obviously they're not the native people of Louisiana, but these were the people who were there when the United States took over, when, the land was sold by Napoleon, because he tried to take back over Haiti and was defeated by mosquitoes and yellow fever. So I'm filming the same day I'm finishing up Cecile and Marie Grace, because it's April 1st. So while you guys are starting on Josephina. But nonetheless, I'm reading a book on diseases, and that's why Napoleon sold Louisiana for so cheap, is because the Haitians in Haiti, the slaves, massive slave revolt that was successful, which obviously having just happened frightened the Americans as they took over. But Napoleon tried to put that down, and yellow fever happened, and they were killed. And the natives weren't, the people living there weren't killed, because as I mentioned in a previous video talking about the free blacks, and is mentioned in Cecile and Marie Grace's books, yes, yellow fever is nasty, but once you get it, you don't get it again, which is the reason Marie Grace and her father were safe, because they had it when Marie Grace was younger. So, and her mother and brother didn't die of yellow fever. I think they died of cholera, which is a waterborne disease, not mosquitoes. But nonetheless, back to this. So that's where obviously Cecile's mother's family came from, because they lived. Her mother was a native to the areas around New Orleans. You see that a lot with her uncle, who's a riverboat captain. So they speak French, and they're Catholic. So I'm assuming, obviously, Marie Grace is Catholic. I don't know if her father's Catholic. Again, he's from Philadelphia, so he could be Catholic. They don't really discuss his background. We know he's a doctor from Philadelphia. That is pretty much it. That's all we really learn about her father. We learn a little bit more about her mother's family just through her uncle Luke. So, but she would technically be considered a Cajun, because she's Roman, at least on her mother's side. So, or a Creole, because they're mixed. A lot of these they're native, they're Catholic, and they have French or Spanish descent. Now, of course, in Cecile and Marie Grace's time, they spoke French. I'm surprised they didn't speak Spanish, but I don't think the Spanish influenced the architecture, but I don't think they influenced that much of the language, because people were still very much speaking French. So, But nonetheless, this talks about the culture and the histories and some of the misconceptions, including one that I had, that the Cajuns are directly connected to the Arcadians. Now, the Arcadians were from France. They were French Canadians. They were living in a land that was considered Arcadia, but it's now Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and I think there's at least one or two other provinces, possibly New Brunswick, in that area. And then you had the French and Indian Wars happened, and the French lost. And so the English took over Canada, and they kicked out these Arcadians, and they were scattered everywhere. But by the time some of them ended up in Louisiana, it was a good 10, 20 years later, I think is what they say in this video. So they're not, and then they intermixed with everybody. So they have some relation, and there obviously is some mixing around, but they're not pure Arcadians, which would have been the French, part of that French Canadian on that East Coast people. And obviously not all French Canadians are Arcadians, but regardless. I know this a little bit because me and my husband did our honeymoon in Eastern Canada. So we went to a Arcadian museum, which was actually very interesting. I never heard of them. So, but nonetheless, it's a very interesting video. It talks about that culture. It talks about what was going on. It talks about kind of the modern stuff that's going on and how things are intermixing. So it is very interesting. And it connects because, again, Cecile and Marie Grace were part of this. This was not necessarily the discourse, but these were their people. They would have been considered Creole and Cajun because they were, again, they spoke French, and they were native to Louisiana. And of course, Marie Grace was born there. So this is, how long is this? It's about a half an hour, a little over a half an hour. So it is a very interesting video. I highly recommend it. I will link it below. But this is the last video media for Cecile and Marie Grace. We're going to be moving on to Kirsten up in Minnesota, and in the same time period, because they overlap by like a year, I think. And then we'll be moving on to the Civil War with Addie, where I'll get a little bit, possibly more into the Civil War. And then we're going to do a massive jump from the 1860s to the 1905 with Samantha. So we're going from a poor black escaped slave girl to highly wealthy white child. So, and no, even if I tried to insert some of the other historical dolls that came in the Be Forever, if you know American Girl, there's nothing in that gap. There's nothing in that gap at all. So at least I don't think so. Oh, look, Melody might be. I think but I'm pretty sure she's the 1920s. So nonetheless, those are the jumps. So we're going to be moving on to Kirsten next, and then with a lot of the pioneer stuff into Addie with the American Civil War, and then we're going to go jump to Miss Samantha. So like and subscribe. Check out the rest of the channel, and I will see you next time. Thank you.